Welcome to this edition of the Dapr Community Call. Thank you for joining. It's August 10th. My name is Ori. I'll be hosting this community call as I do for many of these. This is actually exciting because this is the first time we're doing the community call in a different time, hopefully to accommodate some other time zones. We have the community. It really is a global community. So we got folks in Asia, in Australia, all over the place. And we'd love to get your feedback if this is a good time. Right now, it's 5 p.m. Pacific time for us that are in the US and the West Coast. Maybe we want to push this an hour or two, so let us know. So throughout this call, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them. We have only a couple of topics today, so hopefully there'll be plenty of time to ask questions and just open discussions at the end. We always try to give some time to community members to just ask questions about anything Dapr. But remember, these community calls are recorded, so you can always come back to them. And if you have additional questions that are not addressed in the call, feel free to hop to Discord and continue it over there. We always try to keep an eye on it. Maintainers are engaging in there, trying to help, and even other community members. So today, Artur is going to go over the configuration API, which has been discussed over several GitHub issues, I think, and has really matured and is something that's kind of exciting as a new API for Dapr. He's going to run through that. And also, Mike is going to talk about the new version of the Dapr Visual Studio Code extension that came out today, version 0.50, which has a bunch of cool features. He's going to talk all about that. So without further ado, I will stop sharing and let Artur take it away.
Okay. And let me present. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Ori. So this presentation is a summary of what has been discussed, and also the same way feedback on the proposal from Skyo. He calls this proposal version 0.3 because the third iteration. So it's basically on top of that. So this everything I'm going to say here is on top of that proposal. We have a small video with this presentation in the issue, if you're following that. If not, this is just a recap of that. So, and this I think is the first new building block since 1.0. I think. I don't think we had another one. So what is the motivation? What are the scenarios for this new building block? So imagine that you have an application. In this case, it's a Java application, but it could be another language. And then you have you're using the Java SDK in this example for Dapr, and then you can say Dapr client dot get configurations for number of threads, and then you get a config, and then this config might change. So next time you start app, your app starts, instead of being 4 or 5, and be a different value. And this configuration will be coming from Dapr. And you want to have a central configuration for all your apps. So that is one scenario. Like, how can I have my configuration for my app to come from Dapr, from a centralized config store? You can also use this feature for Boolean values, where you could say, you know what, get the configuration is going to use a Boolean, and I'm going to use that as a feature flag. And it can allow that on every time this method is executed, a different behavior might be triggered based on the feature flag. And feature flag are handled slightly different than the regular configuration, because the feature flag has to be updated without requiring an app restart. So that's something that's a very important difference. On the previous one, although the API looks the same, the first one, for you to get a new, the value might be cached, and to get a new one, you might need a restart. On the other one, it's not cached, and once there's a change in the value, you get the value, the refresh value very quickly. So you always your app behavior can change without requiring a restart. Also, you want to enable scripting where if you have like a bash script and you don't want to use the SDK, of course, it's bash. You cannot even use the SDK in this case. You can actually make an API call and get a value and use right away in your scripts. And we also want to support existing state stores. So in this case, you might have a given key value store that you have all your configurations in place, and you want to reuse that, and you don't want, you know what, because if you want to use Dapr, have to migrate to a store that Dapr understands. So you want to make sure that this is as extensive as possible for you to bring in your own state store or your own config store with existing values. What are things that we are not supporting? We are not supporting Dapr configuration depending on its own configurations. So it might sound obvious, but I want to call that out because it was one of the points in the discussion in the issue, was that will Dapr will I be able to configure my sidecar with these configurations? And the answer is no. This is an application configuration. This is not to modify Dapr configuration. Another point was like, oh, why do we want to have duplicate keys and be able to differentiate just by labeling them? So the API will not make the differentiation. So the API will be as generic as possible, and complexities will be handled in the component implementation for each config store. So I just call that out, that the API is as simple as possible. We're not going to bring in different features from different config stores into the API. So the feature sets we want to design for, first is going to be read-only. We're going to start with a read-only mode where Dapr only reads the configuration. And if you want to modify a configuration, the expectation is that you use whatever is the tooling appropriate towards that particular config store to modify values. And you can imagine this similar behavior to what we have today in the secret store, where you don't set a secret through Dapr, you only read a secret. If you want to set a secret, you use the proper tools for the secret store that you're using. So it's the same concept here. We just read the values. If we want to change it, let's say you're using Azure service, a configuration service, you go to the Azure portal and set the values there. So it's read only, and the app will read those values from the sidecar. Hot reloading. What does that mean? It means that once there's a change, once the sidecar detects a change in the storage, the sidecar will automatically refresh the cache value, and the application will be notified. So this can allow change of behavior dynamically without requiring the sidecar or even the app to be restarted. So this was a big this ticket item that was discussed because there is a risk in adopting this type of behavior where if the behavior change causes an outage, you don't have an incremental rollout strategy for this type of feature flags. It's all or nothing. So and that's why we recommend as much as possible for you to use the Kubernetes rolling strategies. So if there's any change in behavior in production, you incrementally roll it out so you can detect problems early on. So feature flag completely stops that, and it's like a flip switch on and off for the behavior of an app. So but still a very much needed feature where people like, yeah, for some scenarios, I want to have a feature flag because it's a well-controlled feature, and I just will be able to turn on and off anytime I want. And then we also want to be content agnostic, in the sense that the API will not tell if you're going to be a key value store or a document store. It's just going to save the text. And if the content is a number or a JSON document, that will be transparent for the API. And we want to keep that agnostic because that keeps the API flexible enough to support both a key value or a document store. And that is up to the SDKs to provide multiple formats when it's deserializing the value. So you might say, maybe in the future, we have a configuration that can read YAML from text. So the API will not limit that, and will also not make that hard-coded concept. So let's start with HTTP API. So the basic is very similar to what we have today in the state API, where you get a configurations and you pass the key and you can pass metadata. So this is exactly a copy from the state API. You get a single value. If you want to do a bulk get, it's almost the same as the bulk get API from the state API. The only difference is that in the response, we don't return an array. We return a struct that contains one property that has the arrays. So this makes it a little bit more extensible than what we have today in the bulk get API for Dapr. So that was a feedback that we got, and we so I propose that we do it slightly different. But again, it's very similar to the state API. Another thing you can notice here is that the version, it returns the version per key. In the proposal from Sky, we had a proposal where the whole configuration as a whole would have a version, and that is not very extensible because not every state configuration store will allow a grouped version of the configuration. Instead, every key will have its own version, and it maps really well to the E-tag concept we have in the state API. So if you're familiar with the E-tag concept, the version concept is very similar. Although we don't support setting a configuration, the version can still be used for like auditing. So you can say which version we will use, look at as an audit attribute. So it's kind of a nice to have, but it's not being used to set anything. And let me go next. And again, every value is a text. Okay, is a string. Watch and subscribe. This one, we might change a little bit how we go after we start implementing this. But my idea is that we start using WebSockets for this. So this way, the application can watch for a key or a subset of keys, and don't have to have a restart. So this is how we can support, for example, hot reloading. We can say, for these particular configurations, I want to be notified immediately once they change. Don't cache it. Even if you have cache, make sure as soon as the cache is updated, let me know. So this is a way that Dapr can, for example, use some sort of pub sub mechanism to the configuration store to get notified on those. And the way Dapr would talk to the app is through a WebSocket. This is also a first time that we introduced API like this, because it would allow applications that don't have an HTTP point to receive notifications from Dapr. So today, for any API that requires the sidecar to talk to the app needs to expose either an HTTP or a gRPC endpoint. So this will be the first time I would say, for this particular API, you don't need that. So, so that will simplify some of the applications that use Dapr. And if this proves successful, we can definitely extend similar APIs to other building blocks. The gRPC API, that was basically inspired by the proposal from Skyo as well. So the methods will be get configuration and subscribe to configuration. And the subscribe will use gRPC stream. so you can get notifications. The configuration request, it will pass the store name, and will optionally send a list of strings, a list of keys, and also a metadata. The idea here is that the get configuration request does not have any concept of application ID, and we use the terminology key instead of name to make it similar to how we have in the state API. The response will be a configuration item with no app ID, no store ID, and no need for application configuration type. It's just directly the response. We have a list of items. A configuration item has a key, it has a value, and has a version, and it has the metadata. The key is required because it's important for you to know to what key the value maps to. So again, very similar to the bulk state API, if you're familiar with that. And the subscribe configuration request is the same thing. It's actually a mirror of that. The only reason why we keep that as a separate object, although they're the same, is for extensibility. So if there's any extensibility in the future that requires a change only to the subscribe and not to the get configuration, you don't have a breaking change. So that's the only reason, but they are identical. How would that configuration look like? So if we have a local file, you can have a local file that is a JSON, and every key that you pass to the API, you can map that to a JSON path if you think it that way, x.y.z, and then just navigating in the tree and get the value, returning back to the application. And if you want to have an environment variable configuration store, then the key will map to a environment variable. So as simple as that. If you use Azure App Configuration, you can have a connection string, and you can have also a feature like labels. So on Azure App Configuration, you can assign labels to a configuration. So there are multiple values, one per label. So if you want to have one for value for production and one per value for development, it's just a different label in app configuration. Your app using Dapr, it still fetches with the same key and even same app configuration. But in the development cluster, you're going to have one configuration. In the production cluster, you're going to have a separate configuration for your component, like you're seeing here. So like I said at the beginning, every complexity about how values are separated, it's all done in the component implementation. The API remains as simple as get by key, So that's the paradigm that we are having here. So what are the frequently asked questions? And I think that's oh, thanks, Jonathan, for putting the proposal in.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions.
So there is, yeah, thanks, Ori. There is. So I went ahead and like put some common configuration question that I saw in the issue. So what if I want different apps to have different configurations? So the idea here is that you could simply have a separate component configuration for that. So one is myconfig app A, that was myconfig app B, and they read from different files, for example, or they could read from a different Azure configuration service endpoint. So all the separation happens in the component. What if I want to support per app and per environment? So as you might get the hint, we might be able to have something like the app configuration might have a connection string, right? And you might have like a prefix where each app configuration is prefixed by a given value. And there's a label that says one's development, one's production. So the idea here is that the opinion about how do I save my configuration, that I believe belongs to each team and each development and each organization, each development team, each organization, that falls into the configuration. It doesn't pollute the API. So the API remains as simple as possible, and any complexity of like, I want to have a very opinionated way of how I save my configuration. So that is an implementation detail on the component. Okay, and that's very like the Dapr way of doing things. If you look at all the Dapr APIs, they're very simple, and all the complexity about how to handle the simplicity in different scenarios fall into the component implementation. Future considerations. Do we keep the watch API or do busy waiting from the SDKs? That's implementation detail, where we might decide, okay, maybe doing busy waiting, pinging, like getting the key every minute or so, it might be enough. Although it's like a CPU heavy operation. Would Dapr SDK replicate similar feature set to Azure's app configuration SDKs like AspNet, Spring Cloud, etc.? I think that could be a way that Dapr could be a provider in AspNet, for example, where like get this configuration from Dapr, and then all the connection, all the extensions. So like all the connection to Dapr is handled behind the scenes for you. So same thing with Spring. So we could have this in the future where like for a particular language, a particular framework, we have like a Dapr plugin or extension that you can add that will read the configuration from Dapr and not from a local file. So we could provide that in the future. Should SDKs be opinionated about document-based configuration, content type as JSON and YAML? So I think it's the future will tell if there's a demand for people to read JSON and YAML. I think the SDKs will evolve towards that, and I don't believe the SDK, the API need to be changed. Should Dapr offer an admin API or let administrators use the portals? So I think right now it's the safest bet is to let the changes to the configuration be done in a portal and not through Dapr. Otherwise, you start to get into like RBAC type of permissions as well. Which app can add it, which one, and then like, does it make sense for the app to actually change a config dynamically? That start to blur the line between configuration API and state API a little bit, you know. So so that's why for this iteration, it's better to postpone that decision. And we're not closing the door. We're just postponing that decision. Do we support the need to? Do we need to support a specific configuration key version? We don't have that need yet, but we should have an API that is extensible to allow that. So if in the future there is a need, okay, I want to have a particular version of this key, the API should easily be extensible. The question now is about how the components will support that, because not every component will necessarily keep a history of every key value through that has been changed. So we might not be able to necessarily fetch that on every single API as every single configuration store. So that's why is another decision that I say for this long of a discussion that we had so far about the configuration API, we can take those decisions later as separate proposals. So I'm not closing the doors to this to any of that. I'm just saying that we can decide those later on and have a really good basic API right now. And that's all I have. So if there are questions from the audience, I'm happy to take. So back to you, Ari.
Yeah, thank you, Arthur. I don't see any questions. I think this is kind of exciting. Like you said, this would probably be the first building block we add to Dapr after version 1.0, which is kind of cool. I think it will enable a lot of interesting scenarios we're hearing from the community are important, like you mentioned, feature flags and other stuff. I guess I have a question. You mentioned about the hot loading, where people want to know if a configuration changed and without having to reset anything, still kind of consume that change. But is that thing going to be optional if I don't want to have hot reloading? Will I be able to do that?
Yeah, I think that that was not presented yet, but the idea is that if a particular key needs to be needs to be hot reloaded, I think you have to like subscribe to it. It's like register this key to be reloaded dynamically.
Okay.
So
Got
that's why you saw the WebSocket API and the Stream API. Is like that's the case. We need to use those for some of the keys to be watched for.
Got it. Okay, awesome. So I think if there are no questions now, feel free to, of course, go to the GitHub issue and continue the discussion there, or add anything of your own. And of course, as always on Discord, we continue to discuss these things. And with that, Mike, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Ori. Hi, folks. So Mike Morton, I think I've been on this call before with some of you. I work on, along with my team, I'm the PM working on the Dapr extension, as well as we do other things like the Docker extensions in VS Code and Visual Studio. And we have something called the TIE extension also. If you're not familiar with TIE, I'm going to introduce that a little bit today also. I'm actually going to turn off my screen sharing. I will warn you, Ori, that my neighborhood's been having internet issues about 2 or 3 times a day for only about 45 seconds. So if I disappear, I'll be back in less than a minute. So be patient. Sorry about that.
Okay, we'll take that into account. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over here. Screen, that one. There we go. Hopefully you can see my screen either up or coming up very soon. Okay, there we go. You should be able to see that. So either last night or this morning. So in Zoom, just.
I'm not seeing your screen yet. Looks like you're trying to share, but we're not seeing. I'm not seeing.
Yeah. So Zoom.
Oh, I think Mike may have encountered those infamous network problems.
Yeah, is it like a permission problem sometimes in Zoom?
No, I think we tested this before. I think it's exactly what he said, where he disappeared and comes back. Here he is. Okay.
Actually, that wasn't an internet problem. Zoom actually pooped out on me. So
okay.
That was a whole different issue, unfortunately. There, I reshared my screen. Let me know if you can see that now.
Yes, now we see it. Great.
Excellent. Awesome. Sorry about that. So, like I was saying, we released an update to the Dapr extension to the marketplace just this morning. So you'll see out here, I think it's version 0.05. Yes, 0.5. We had some. There's also a blog, and I posted in the chat the URL to this blog. The work that was done on this release was actually done by a couple of interns, Shruti and Jason. They did a great job. It was a lot of great fun working with them. You can see in their words what they did in this release and where to install it and how to get started. What I was going to show you is just a real quick, like kind of just a couple screenshots, okay? And let me switch screens over here. There we go. And Ori, I want to confirm you can still see my screen.
Yeah, we see it. We see your VS Code window.
Excellent. I just wanted to make sure because of my great internet. So what we're looking at here is a real simple one of the Dapr, the Hello World Dapr example. And for those of you that haven't used our tools before, I thought I'd do just a super quick demo of where the Dapr extension can help you. So here we're looking at my launch JSON file. And if I bring up the command palette, you'll see one of the things that the Dapr extension offers you is to, excuse me, is to scaffold some Dapr tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and say, yeah. And what you need to do at this point is pick an existing launch JSON. And this is just the kind of the built-in VS Code node launch JSON so that you can basically hit F5 and it will start your node program. So I'm going to pick that as one to basically clone. And then I get to name my app. So this is whatever you would typically name your Dapr app. So let's just call it the community app just for fun because I haven't used that name. and it's node, so we'll stick with port 3000. So with just those two answers, what I get is I get a second launch JSON configuration that should show up any moment. There we go. Oops, I scrolled that way. It's trying. There we go. And what you'll see is it's the same launch JSON, which again gives me that F5 experience, whether you're debugging or not inside of VS Code. I'm going to close a few windows and see if I can speed up my internet here because it is struggling. Okay, and what you'll also see is we have a pre and a post task that get launched. That's kind of the extra sauce that the Dapr extension adds. And we've gone ahead and scaffolded those tasks over here in your task.json. Gotta find a way to make this a little faster. I'm sorry, 1 second. I'm closing down a few things on my other screens. That machine is unhappy with me at the moment.
So in the meantime, just to explain to people maybe who don't know VS Code as well, the launch.json, that's kind of like the debug kind of configuration or parameters for your application, and the tasks are like the different things that happen, right? That you're running when you're debugging.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I think the thing with the Dapr
right.
that really needs that happens when you're running it through the CLI is that CLI actually runs your application, but it also runs a sidecar. If you're just running Dapr through the VS Code kind of like play button or debug button, you also want to make sure that VS Code knows to run the sidecar with it. Is that correct? Is that what these things are doing basically? Mike?
That's exactly right. And now if you see here, I'll go over here. So now typically to run my Dapr app, I would run, I'd do the Dapr start command, and I'd have to give it a couple ports, the app port and the app name. But now what I can do, because I've created this launch test, this launch JSON, is I can just go ahead and pick that and then just hit F5 or press the green arrow. And what this is going to do is it's going to start my Dapr application. It's going to start my application as well as you said, Ori, the Dapr sidecar, and it will worry about the ports and stuff. And so what I'll have is I'll have a Dapr app running, and because I have the Dapr extension installed, excellent, we're going to debug anyways. If things go well, you'll see a Dapr application show up here momentarily. My machine is really failing me. I really apologize. I'm going to shut down some more things while we're waiting. And there we do. You can see that the Dapr app has shown up here in the application window. And that's not necessarily new, but now what we have done is you can click on that. And this is what Shruti and Jason, our interns, did, is they added a details panel. And this is just kind of a start. We put some very kind of high-level details about the application. You still have the right click where you can do some invokes. You can invoke the app. You can publish a message to it. So it gives you a quick and easy way to try out an invocation or a pub sub message. You'll see something we did add was a stop application. So now you can stop your application really easily. I don't have to remember to come down here and hit Control-C down here. I can just right click and stop my app. Well, not only can I see the details of the app itself, I can now expand the app and I see which components that this app is taking advantage of. And here you can see it's using the pub sub component. And if I click on that, I get a few details about the pub sub, which it's just a little bit of details. We have some future plans to do things such as maybe if you, these are like ideas. So we'd love to hear from you. If you maybe double click on this, we'll actually show you the component file that describes the pub sub. So that if you want to make any edits or modifications, you can do so. We may even have a facility to let you add a new component. So maybe a plus sign here would prompt you for what kind of component you want. We'd give you a scaffolded component that you could fill in, hopefully someday with IntelliSense. So we'd really like to make it easier for you to view, modify, and add new components to your application. So like I say, for now, you can view the details of the component, view the details of the app. The extension also gives you that scaffolding that I showed you. So it's a one-click F5. And if you have multiple apps that you want to start at the same time, you can, of course, if you're familiar with launch JSON, you can have one launch JSON actually start more than one at a time. So you can kind of chain these launch JSONs. And so that's one way to start multiple things. But I'm going to show you an easier way here in a moment using a thing called tie. But for now, I want to stop, and I can't see the question area at the moment, Ori, because I've closed too many windows. So I'm going to pause there. This is our updated Dapr app. It's pretty slick. We'd love for you to go install it. The web address to the blog tells you where you can install it and obviously read more about it. And I can't see, are there any questions?
Yeah, so I don't see any questions either. I'll just mention another cool thing here is that in that application list in that window, that would also capture things that have been started outside of VS Code. So for example, if I've been running things with a Dapr CLI or something like that, I would still see that here, which is really kind of awesome. And I know for me, it's really useful having those details because sometimes you just need to hop to the terminal and just like see like what was the port that I was using. So this is really cool. I think it makes it much more of a kind of streamlined experience on VS Code if you're used to that environment. I know a lot of our developers are using VS Code.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it, Ori. Whether you want to use the launch run and debug launch JSON or the command line, this application window can help you. Can help you do a little testing, a little diagnosing of what your app's made up of. So yeah, give it a try. Let us know. Let us know what other features would be helpful to you. We did have one other thing I forgot to mention. If you hover over the top application, you actually can click on that. And what window opened? That will launch the, well, you can see that actually failed. I apologize. Typically that will open the dashboard. That's the Dapr dashboard. So then you can easily go to the Dapr dashboard and do all the things you would do from that web-based dashboard. So we've kind of integrated that in rather than try to duplicate everything here. We just wanted to integrate into that Dapr dashboard that has a lot of great information.
Is that because you click on components, not on the app? Is that
so it shouldn't be. I'll definitely try it again. Let's see if so. That's definitely a bug. But no, I think it's just my. Oh well, I think we may have a bug. Arthur, thank you very much.
I was a tester before.
Yeah,
there you go.
Root causing live.
So
that's awesome.
That shouldn't have been the case, but it looks like it was the case. So yeah, you can launch the dashboard really easily just by clicking on the little dashboard icon. It appears the bug means you have to first select the application. That should not be the case, and we'll log an issue and try to get that fixed. All right, so that's our new Dapr extension. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I kind of mentioned it, did not mean to show you my pretty background. Let's go bring up our other VS Code window. Tie is another tool that my team built. There's two parts to tie. There's a tie CLI. So if you want to just use all of this from the CLI, you can do so, do a tie run, for example. And basically, this isn't a tie demo, so I don't want to get into that. But tie can be used to start one or more services and their dependencies. And it's pretty darn powerful, I feel. If we look here, tie has what's called the tie YAML. And the tie YAML basically describes each of your services. So in this case, I say, hey, I have this service and it knows .NET really well right now. So for .NET projects, you just point at the CS project and it will go build it. It can even containerize it without a Docker file. It will start it. It will hook up a debugger. It will do log aggregation. Tie does a lot of great things for you. So all you do is just specify, hey, I want one of these replicas started up. It's my voting replica that is created by this project. I need a Redis database created. I also have another service, which is called my worker service, and you can find that here. And then I also need a Postgres database, and so on and so on. So you can have as many services as you want. You come down here, you do a tie run, and when you did that, it would start all these services up, and all those services. And I can't demo this. I apologize. I literally got it working last night, and I won't go from there. Luckily, I took some screenshots. So when you do a tie run, or again, we give you an easy way to just click the F5 with a launch JSON if that's your preference. And we'll actually hook up those debuggers for you for all your .NET processes. Your tie services would show up here. So let's say I'm using Dapr. Tie and Dapr are amazing because with 2 lines of code, if I uncomment these 2 lines of code, what this is saying is for all of my services that have a project backed by them, please start up a Dapr sidecar. And so without having to worry about any of the Dapr sidecar start commands or the app port or the app name, it's just all going to be handled automatically for you. And it's really magical. If you're a Dapr developer and you're using VS Code, you got to go try Thai. I think you'll be really wowed by how much it helps your process. So if I was to do that with this 2-line change, what that would look like, again, luckily I took a picture, is in that Thai extension, you would see this. You'd see the Thai application with a name, and that name comes from the Thai YAML. If we go back here, you'll see that we have a name up here. Actually, it defaults. If you don't specify the name, it will default to, I believe, your folder name. It shows you each of your services. So I have an event service, a web API, a web app, and a worker service. And I asked for a Zipkin database to grab some metrics and stuff. And then what we've done is a recent change to the UI is we broke out, these used to all be one big flat line of services, but these are kind of your application services that you've asked for specifically. And the other services, which, hey, we put it in this thing called other services. These are all your Dapr sidecars. You'll see for each service that is backed by a project file, you're going to get a Dapr sidecar. You're also going to get the ingress, which is something that Thai allows you to specify some real simple ingress rules, which is pretty cool because you can do a lot of simple rules that typically you would see maybe up on Kubernetes, where you can specify a full-blown ingress rules. They're much more simplified in Thai, but it lets you simulate a lot of those very common scenarios that you would do up in a Kubernetes or another runtime environment. So there's a service spun up to handle those ingress. And then, of course, there's a placement service, which is actually used by Dapr itself, as you know, as Dapr developers. So this is what that would look like. Well, what we've just added, because we really were only playing really well with .NET developers, and we'd like to expand that. So we'd like to teach Thai to know other languages just as well as .NET, so that if it was a Node project, I could just put in the Node project location, and it would know how to build or transpile if it was maybe TypeScript, and then start the Node project. So that's our goal, is to really teach Thai how to know other languages like Node and Python and maybe Go, who knows, Java. We're not sure. We'd like to do them all. We'll prioritize those. But in the meantime, one of our big goals is to really work well with Dapr, because Thai plus Dapr just equals amazing love, in my opinion. So what we did enable it to do, and if I was to uncomment those lines, I now have a Python, and you can see I actually have the source for that here. I have this Python worker that, if we look at this, it's actually taken advantage of a Dapr pub sub. So it's saying, hey, I want to subscribe to topic B, blah, blah, blah. So now with the change we made just yesterday, not only will it start my Python app, and you'll see, I can't point it to like the Python, like the requirements.txt file. That would be awesome. But what I can say is run this executable called Python and pass in some arguments and point it at the working directory to basically say, hey, go run my Python app, which is this file right here. Well, in addition, it will now start up a Dapr sidecar for that. So you now can have Dapr sidecars spun up by Thai for any language you want. It's not quite like as well as .NET, not quite as integrated as .NET yet, but it does allow you to reach out to all these other languages and say, I want to start this other executable basically, and please start up a Dapr sidecar for me. And so when I did that last night, when my machine was actually behaving, what that looked like is very similar to what I just showed you, but you'll see now I have a Pi worker service and I have a Dapr sidecar for that Python service. So we've really expanded the capabilities of Thai and the Thai plus Dapr relationship. So yeah, go install the new Thai stuff. And I want to put a pointer to that. So if I can find my right thing here, you will see that here's a tweet. I'll put this in here. Here's a tweet of the Thai. You can install the CLI and then install the Thai extension. and you'll be good to go. And you can try this out, and we'd love your feedback. Honestly, if you're a Dapr developer using VS Code, Thai is really going to make your life, I think, quite a bit better for that inner loop development cycle. And I didn't show you the many other things you can do. I wish my machine was behaving, but from wrong window. Got so many windows open. That's why my machine is probably so slow. But if we were to look at this over here again, things you can do. If I was to hover over these, I can hover over any of these right now for .NET only, and I can attach a debugger to any one of these services whenever I want. You can click here to get logs, and the logs show up right here. And if I go to if I turn on a thing called Seek, you can get that aggregated logs, and you can see all the logs from all the different services all in a line, and you can search and sort. And so Thai can really help you diagnose your application as well as debug it for .NET today, for debug, and we hope to do other things for Node and Python in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for giving me a few minutes. Dapr plus Thai equal love. So give it a try.
Yeah, so we have a question for George. Does Thai fit into developer workflow for developing groups of Kubernetes services, some Daprized, others not, and using bridge to Kubernetes? Or are these separate dev workflows?
That's a great question. You can mix and match. I mean, you can use Thai to start up whatever services you want locally. But then if you need to switch to a flow and use bridge to Kubernetes, where, okay, you've deployed many of your services up into a Kubernetes cluster. And remember, bridge to Kubernetes works with any Kubernetes cluster. It doesn't have to just be Azure. It can be on-prem. It can even be a local Kubernetes running. And then you can use bridge to Kubernetes to debug in that hybrid situation where most of your services are running up in your Kubernetes cluster, and one or two of your services are running locally. Now, I think the question is, so that's definitely an extension of your inner loop that gives you that hybrid debugging. Have we made it so that you can use Thai to hit F5 and to start the local services and hook up to bridge to Kubernetes? No, we haven't integrated the two. We have talked about it. I would love to hear more. If that's a scenario that you think that would be really awesome, please get a hold of me, mike.morton@microsoft.com, or go to the Thai repo and log an issue saying, hey, I'd love to see this. We'd love to hear more about that.
Great. Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Ori, for letting me have a few minutes.
Sure.
And again, mike.morton@microsoft.com. If you have questions, feel free to email me or go to the Thai repo and ask questions through issues.
Great. So with that, I think we're at the final part of the community call, which is just open discussion. So if anybody has any questions, anything they want, we can also unmute you. So just hop on the chat, drop a question, and we're happy to discuss. We got a few maintainers on the call. I'm not seeing anything, so I'll give it a couple more minutes. I don't know if any of the maintainers want to chime in.
I'd like to point out Pratik is one of the developers on my team, and he has done a lot of this Thai work recently. Pratik, I don't want to put you on the spot, but did I miss anything key with either the Thai or the Dapr extension that you can think of? And if not, that's totally fine.
I see a question coming from Andrew. Is there any interest in Dapr Service Fabric? So I think we've kind of, the way we're prioritizing different hosting environments is by the need from the community. So I think if we hear more scenarios where this is useful, I think we'll definitely, we have been looking at it a little bit from what we've seen and heard from current Service Fabric users at least at this point, is that a lot of the stuff that Dapr offers, which is kind of like a programming model um, for basically wherever you run your application, if you're using Service Fabric, you're getting a lot of that. So things like actors and various different building blocks are kind of already covered, maybe only partially. But I think that's why maybe there hasn't been that much of an interest. But this is definitely something we're looking into. I don't know, Archer, if you want to speak to that, or anybody else from the maintainer side.
Yeah, I think what you said is correct, Ori. Like there has to be like a need, a demand for that before we can consider other running platforms.
So Andrew, I don't know if you have a scenario, you have something that you're looking for, we'd love to hear from you. We can do it now. I can actually unmute you, or we can do that like over GitHub or whatever. I think you should be able to unmute if you want to share.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, thanks for that. It's been a good call. Thanks very much for changing the time so people like myself down under can get involved. Yeah, the reason the reason I ask is that you know, we're in production on Service Fabric now, but you know, for a host of reasons we're on 95% guest executables. So it's Java, Spring Boot, PubSub, IoT, machine learning. So yeah, we've sort of taken advantage of what we can from a guest executable point of view in Service Fabric, but it just seems like what Dapr is offering would give us a very good path to move to tighter integration without having to you know, jump in at the deep end with Kubernetes and still use all the nice and easy orchestration that we get with Service Fabric. So yeah, that's why we're interested. It's because we you know, we don't have a big investment in that in-depth integration with Service Fabric. It's more about the process orchestration and the resilience of the hosting environment.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. I think yeah, I think that is something like the maintainers keep looking at, and that sounds like a reasonable need. But I guess as we hear more from more users, we'll definitely see how to prioritize this.
And I think the best way to keep track of that is through GitHub issues. Even if it's not addressed right away, the more people chime in with the same situation, the higher it's going to be the priority on the issue. So I think that's the best chance to how to get this prioritized.
Yep. I guess another question I have, and might be for people who are not involved and might only be able to give us that feedback over Discord or on Twitter, is this is the first time we're moving the call to a different time zone. I think for some folks in Asia, this is still a little too early. That's what I suspect. So I'm wondering if people can let us know. We're really thinking of maybe pushing this by an hour or two next time. And we'll keep alternating between kind of like an Asia and an Australia friendly time and a European kind of end of day plus US early day. So we hopefully get coverage of the entire globe. It's always hard, but really looking for some feedback about this, because I think turnout is a little low today, which is okay because it's the first time we're doing this. But really wanting to know that we're not missing out people. We know we have a bunch of really excited and involved and engaged community members and contributors in Asia, and we definitely want to have these community calls with the entire community. So please send us your feedback and suggestions on how to do this better. Okay, with that, I think we'll call it a day and finish this meeting for now. Thank you so much for joining. as you know, we record this, so you might be watching this on YouTube. If not, then go check it out on YouTube if you're currently on the call. There's additional community calls from the past, and always a good place to look if you're interested in a call that maybe has not been in your time zone or you weren't able to attend. As always, please engage on GitHub, on Discord. These are the best places to reach maintainers and the rest of the community. So thank you very much.